Hello everyone and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm your host Zach.
And I'm Steven, and today we're talking about a number of things. First of all, I'm going to get Zach's take on KeyForge and Warhammer Champions and Transformers, unbeknownst to him. And we're also going to talk about Covenant Masters, the new Guardians of Abyss expansion for Arkham Horror. We've got that new Discover Lands Unknown.
The unique board game.
Which is the first, and then answering a number of questions from the audience. Maybe most pressing, why in the world are we pivoting to collectible games seemingly all of a sudden? We'll answer that question and more, so stay tuned.
Well, there's a whole lot going on.
There actually is, but this is post-Gen Con. So this is like normal mode, right?
Everyone saves out their big announcement for Gen Con. Big announcement comes, it happens, and then you spend the rest of the year sprinting towards Christmas, and then all of a sudden it's January. At least that's the retailer's life.
But that's also that's definitely changing. You know, there's a lot of harumphing about the fact that a lot of Gen Con this year was big announcements about games that'll be at Kickstarter next year.
That is obnoxious to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the whole Gen Con paradigm is going to change. I think it will change because it has to. Gen Con will return to / must return to more about the connection, the players, the community, the playing of the games, the seeing each other once a year, the getting together with your friends to role play, that kind of thing. I think it's going to be less of a big exhibition for publishers to show off their new stuff and try to move it. I just think that the world has moved away from those kinds of things.
Well, and I think what's happening, we've talked about Kickstarter a couple times on the show, but what's really happening is that the number of companies who have the resources to design, publish, and print a game, and then surprise everybody with it, is going down, and also the interest in doing that is going down.
Why is that going down?
Because it is so easy to basically pre-sell the game through Kickstarter before you've invested $1 in printing, distribution, managing inventory, having a booth at Gen Con, etc. So a lot of these publishers can have smaller booths at Gen Con. They can basically demo some of their games, build some hype around their brand and the IPs they have coming. And then it's when there's not noise, because Gen Con is when a lot of people are doing stuff, or it used to. It was everyone's dropping their big stuff at Gen Con. It's randomly February 8th this next year, no one might be talking about anything. And then you can say, hey, here's this exciting game that's going to come in 6 to 18 months from now. Kickstart it, and they take no risk. And so the interest level, and I think the other part is because it is easier now as well, because more people can obviously design a game and then fundraise and then print it.
Right.
The number of games we've seen for board games in particular is exponentially expanding, right?
Yeah.
We're talking 3,000 or 4,000 games a year. So even the people that can print it, some of the bigger companies that maybe still use Kickstarter, it's not making as much sense, because if they are taking that risk and no one else is, why would you ever do that?
Right, yeah, that puts you in a vulnerable position.
Now, why you would do it, and I heard you mention this on last week's episode.
We talked about KeyForge, right? I was going to mention that.
I was going to go straight to KeyForge, because as soon as that Gen Con started rolling out, my initial reaction was it is crazy to me that they are not selling this here right now.
That would have been the reason to do the KeyForge announcement and build hype. That's where it makes sense to me to blow up Gen Con and
100%.
Get 20,000 people with a deck.
And my take on that too was, because of the way that game is structured, it's a unique deck building game, or unique deck. I keep saying deck building.
There's no
It's a
building.
unique deck game, so there's no deck building. But because of the way that works, I also could have easily seen it being, you have 20, 30,000 decks, and this is a set that's only ever a Gen Con 2018. Available.
Yeah, you could do that.
It's this is it. If you want to get it, this is when you get it. And then, in 3 or 4 months, you have your actual set with a huge full print run. But they could have printed 20,000 copies of the decks. Uniquely, right?
Maybe.
I get timing and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot involved. But in terms of marketing opportunity, it's
in an ideal world, I think we agree that the concept, and maybe that was the desire. That's something we don't know. Maybe it was the intent, and then it was printing this was more complex than we thought, et cetera. There's always this.
But anyways, I do agree. Gen Con was a little weird for that reason.
Question. This is totally off topic. Actually, it's not off topic at all. It's very much off script. What's going to be the first publisher, or who's going to be the first publisher to do a Kickstarter collectible game? That you kickstart a new set every 3 months, and then, assuming enough people kickstart it, it goes to print.
I mean, I assume...
What's to stop anybody from doing that?
I don't think there's really anything to stop anybody from doing that. I do know that, collectible games tend to have a larger barrier to entry in terms of cost and general interest and stuff. So, you know, a new set coming out or not for a collectible game being based on whether or not a game is kickstarting probably would introduce a lot of like anxiety into the buyer's market.
That's the last thing we need for the collectible games market.
that can either be great or awful, right? Like the moment, I know this is a very serious thing in Magic the Gathering, where the moment that the market thinks it's underprinted, demand goes crazy.
Or the other way, yeah.
The moment the market thinks it's overprinted, but that's where it's like, if you don't even know if a new set's coming out, the amount you're willing to spend on the current set is like...
But does it also, well, you've already spent it though. You already kickstarted that set 3 months ago, and then it gets delivered to you. And by that time, you need to kickstart the next set while you start playing this new set. And does that not inspire you to be like, oh my gosh, for me to keep enjoying this game, I need to make sure it gets funded?
Sure.
So do you then share it everywhere, and then you tell your friends, like, hey, you know, pull in, we'll do an $80 box, Kickstart pledge, that kind of thing?
Well, then you have the weird dynamics of like, you know, if you want the network of retail stores in especially the United States and really the whole world to care about your product, if you just keep kickstarting it, they're not going to care.
So that hasn't slowed it down yet.
Then you have to answer the other fundamentals of like, well, where and how are people going to do this?
It does seem like organized play and having spaces and nights and tournaments and that kind of thing is more relevant to collectible games than it is to board games, for sure.
Board games you can play at your kitchen table with the same 3 people every time. So, but it's an interesting time. I can play
collectible games with you every time at the kitchen table too, though.
Yeah, but part of the allure, right, is that you show up to, like, so tonight's Destiny night.
Especially KeyForge, because I'm whipping you.
Yeah, you are whipping me. But you show up at a like league night for Destiny, and like I know there's going to be 20 or 30 people there with different decks, and so I can experience a whole lot of different decks and whatnot. But anyways, back on script, where are we even at?
Let's talk about Covenant Masters. We've got the final Destiny draft version of Covenant Masters. So this is now 6 events in total, and we kind of unrolled this a little bit as we went, seeing what reactions to the series were, you know, cut back on places, ramped up on places, which is generally a good thing to do. I'd suggest that for anybody trying a new big thing. And maybe this goes back to the KeyForge conversation, right? Like maybe FFG did not want to take the chance that 20,000 unique decks were just going to be totally not cared about because nobody cared about a non-deck building game. So I understand that, but essentially this is a 6-event series. It's our Covenant Masters series. This is a brand that we're going to be expanding over time, assuming everything goes according to plan. So you might see a Covenant Masters for other games as well. It's kind of our premier event series that we're working through and trying to figure out how to find the right balance between a prestigious event without it being terribly competitive and cutthroat, and how to find the lines there. There's the 3rd of the draft format Destiny events is this weekend. Yeah, it's tomorrow if you're listening to this right now.
On Friday.
Yeah. And this is a really cool one because Monk from Monk's Gaming Battlefield is going to be joining us. The first of our friends in the Destiny content space that's coming in. Mike Rudin came to the first one. I shouldn't say that. Mike is a big friend.
Yeah, he does the Jedi Trials podcast, but he came...
Now he does 17 KeyForge podcasts.
He does do 17 KeyForge podcasts. But he came on his own.
Yeah, as a person.
I mean, just as it's the same person, but as a person. But yeah, Monk's coming in, and that'll be a really good time. I'm looking forward to it. The draft events have been really fun. I love how much the tension is cut out from under them. And actually, I've had a lot of people asking, you know, why we switched to not doing just the draft format. And the reality is, releases for this game are very unpredictable.
That's a problem.
Which makes it difficult for us to gauge when a set's going to come out, which also makes it difficult for us to plan events in advance. And then we have a lot of people. I mean, we've had at least 5 or 6 other states besides Oklahoma represented at every event so far.
Yeah.
And so,
which is awesome.
It is awesome. And people are wanting to travel and come to these events, and they're asking us, hey, when are these events going to be? And so part of switching the formats allows us to schedule these events. So we already have the October, November, and December dates and events on the website, on the store. You can see it under the events section. And the formats listed and what to expect. And it doesn't matter if a new set's coming out or not. Because like draft, as an example, is a lot better the closer you are to a new set.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of give and take there. And also had a lot of feedback from people who don't get a draft a lot, maybe where they're from, the stores there don't focus as much on draft as we do, and so they didn't feel comfortable coming to an event like that, and very much prefer constructed or sealed, which are the formats we're featuring in the upcoming Masters. So again, constantly asking the question, this whole event series was designed to build community and be as accessible as possible to people. And I think that's a big reason for the format change here.
So October, we're looking at the standard constructed, and then in November, we're looking at sealed, and then in December, we're looking at trilogies.
And we're crossing our fingers. The Across the Galaxy is supposed to be out in November. So
it'd be really cool if we could do a sealed tournament.
Yeah, it's the Saturday before Thanksgiving. So there's also a small part of me that really hopes they don't repeat that like they did last year with L5R.
Man, didn't they? Can you believe that?
The release dates are typically Thursdays, and Thanksgiving is typically a Thursday. Historically speaking. But hopefully they don't release that set on Thanksgiving. There was an L5R pack last year on Thanksgiving. And
that was fun.
But it's a Saturday before that, so crossing fingers. But also it means that Trilogies event in December is after the 6th set comes out, which means we have a full boat, 3 sets in Trilogies, Legacies through Across the Galaxy.
Hey, Inquiring Minds wants to know, there's always these random movements that are showing up in Destiny. What's this 40 card thing all about? Where are you on this? This mill?
Man,
everyone's complaining about mill.
This is way off script.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Whenever the game started, what was the number? I mean, aside from action cheating, number one concern was like, mill's not fun. It never is, and it never has been, and it never will be. I hope it's not a terribly competitive thing to be doing. Maybe it's cute to kind of pad me around for a while, but no, you don't just not play the game. That's not exciting. And then, surprise, what happens? Mill gets good, and everyone's like, this isn't fun. And now it's like, we got to solve this problem.
So this is the first time, we just got back from Gen Con, obviously, and they had the North American Championship there. And Mike/Bobby Sapphire from Hyperloops, which is one of the big community sites there, he was actually on the stream with me for the top 4 finals. He and his team built a mill deck that was 4 of the top 8 decks.
Yeah.
And it was the exact same deck, and they kind of eliminated each other. And that's the deck that actually went on to win. And a lot of store championship season, so a lot of store championships after that event are now reporting as much as a third or half of the decks in the field being mill.
That's relevant to KeyForge, by the way, which we'll get to later.
Yeah,
you think a deck building game has any deck building involved?
Yeah. So
copy machines.
A half or a third of the field is running mill of some kind, and there are different versions of mill. And part of the architecture here is that Destiny's a different kind of game. So there's the common aggro, mill, combo, mid-range triangle thing going on. But there's different layers of it because there's 2-character mill and 3-character mill. And 2-character mill actually just unseats the 3-character mill deck that wins, that won that event.
It's a response to it.
But then 2-character mill can actually lose to aggro.
Right.
But aggro, it's hard for them to beat the 3-character version of the mill deck because there's too many bodies to defeat in time. But my stance on it, so I think we've seen in the last couple of sets, the general health of characters has been going up. And I think the goal of that is to extend the games. So if the character does the exact same thing, but every character on average has 20 or 30% more health, it seems that the games would be longer.
Gives you more time to mill.
Meantime, mill is winning games. It does give you more time to mill, right? It's like you look at Yoda and you look at the new Anakin, you look at the new, I forget.
Why did I get you talking about Destiny?
I don't know. You really just
totally got you on it. So what do you think about 40 cards? Is that the answer? Do you increase the number of cards in a deck? And why is that wrong?
I think it is an answer. It's a thing you could do. I think it's a short-term fix. For me, I take a pretty hardline stance. There are people that enjoy mill as a strategy. I don't understand them. There are people locally. There are people across the world that enjoy mill, and I'm normally okay with it as long as it's not. And I talked to Jeremy at some point about this, the designer, where it's it's okay as long as it's not the best, and as long as it's not obviously better, and as long as it's a small portion of the field. If there's a 20-person tournament and there's the 1 or 2 people playing mill, I can handle that.
Sure.
But I had friends going out of town to a store championship, and I was like, I really don't want to go because half of my games are going to be mill, and I don't enjoy that at all.
Right. Nobody. Well, I guess some people
do. So 40 cards. And Mike's point is that it not only helps against mill because there's more cards to mill, but it also decreases the consistency of the decks. But right now with 30 cards and the efficiency of how fast you can see a lot of those cards, your deck kind of does the same thing every time, almost too consistently.
But doesn't that need to exist with dice being a random element?
I'm okay with it existing. And I think that's where I take a pretty hardline stance. This is just my personal opinion, which is I do not like mill or action cheating in almost any format. And I would be okay if they literally came and said, hey, here's a list of cards. just not playable
Just
anymore.
don't play them.
It's just gone. Like where it's like, and the problem is that like you're just playing with fire. I get why you introduce cards like Tactical Mastery or Force Speed or Ambush or whatever, and Ambush is probably the most reasonable version of this.
Yeah.
But Destiny, one of my favorite elements of it is the action economy, and so the moment you break that, you're breaking it. And the same thing with like, if you can just mill someone, none of the other. I don't know. Like
it's like KeyForge or Warhammer Champions, right? It's like, how cool are those games because there is no interruption of the basic kind of flow of the game, right? Where it's like, I do my turn, you do your turn, I do my turn.
Yeah.
If something was introduced where it was like, you're doing your turn, and then I do my turn, and then I take another turn, and then I take another turn, and then it's like, well, that's a problem.
And I think on a more macro level, and this is probably more relevant to everyone that's listening instead of just the people that are very familiar with Destiny, is the concept that like, a lot of people want to say, hey, just put out cards that are good against mill. And
no.
Exactly, that's just a house of cards, right? Because it's what happened with X-Wing First Edition, which is you introduce things that are good against mill, and it goes back and forth until eventually you can't fix the end problem.
Yeah.
Like something's always at the end of that list.
Ban it.
And so, I mean, it's really an identity thing where it's like, is mill a fundamental expectation in this game? And if so, you can leave it. And if not, the other element of this final point, and then I'm out of here, is
every podcast listener, they're all experts at Destiny now, even if they had no intention of wanting to be. It's like
you're
after
welcome.
episode 66. That's why we're doing it, because of Order 66.
Order 66. Here we are, episode 60. Execute episode 66. It was a gambit from the beginning. You had to get to this point. Jedi, you're dead. No, but I know what it is. So the other thing is that there's an assertion that mill is too good, and one of the things that drives me crazy in deck building games is that something will win, someone posts a list, and it is a fine-tuned machine, so like just playing it without any skill, you're going to do better than like a bad deck and no skill kind of a situation. Right. And so then you have store championships where half the people are showing up with the same deck, and it feels like a problem. But I remember back in the Poe Maz days that eventually got dealt with Balance of the Force by changing the way Poe and his point cost. But I actually never thought that deck was too good. I just thought that people didn't understand the deck enough to actually counter it, and there's actually cards in the game for any. It wasn't even just like these are the 1-2 cards you can run. It's not like some special denying card. As much as it was like just laziness. It's like, I actually think the community can get around this. They're just choosing not to,
right?
Because they're just submitting to
Path of least
this
resistance,
deck. Yeah. Now, conversely, Nines, when he was a problem, was a real problem.
Well, there are some things that are obvious.
Yeah.
Like, that just is wrong.
And I mean, to be fair, Poe was obnoxious. But at the same time, I think with Mill, that's where I don't know yet. Jury's out for me. I don't know if it's good enough to be a problem that is like, we have to deal with this. But I do know that we have a Balance of the Force, and that a certain Jedi Master should probably be at least 2 points more expensive than he is. And that would probably, like, as an example, if you make, I'll just be explicit, if you make Yoda 2 points extra, is Mill a problem right now?
Yeah, good question. You could also do stuff like, reshuffle the deck when it's gone and do 10 damage to a character. Like, there are other ways that aren't just like changing the entire problem.
And the cool part is, and we saw this with set 4 Legacies when they did the 2-player starter, and they started a new block, is when they changed the overwrite rule.
Yeah.
So we're coming up, this is going to be set 6, then we get set 7, hopefully early next year.
Get out of 1 to 3 and be done with it.
And it's like,
just let them die.
Those cards go away, but a lot of the good mill cards are in the new cycle. But
That's
the
true.
important thing is that if you're going to introduce a new rule, that's when you do it. Which is, if you want to do it, where it's when you mill your opponent's deck, you do 10 damage. And then it becomes a side thing you can be doing. Like Yoda can also be slowly pushing their deck to the end, reshuffle it back up, Yoda kills a character from milling instead of just...
Yeah, and most of the time, by the time the deck is done, if you're playing a reasonable game, that will end the game.
Even make the rule when your opponent gets decked like that. And you have to be careful. You'd have to shuffle it back in, because if not, you could like Ancient Lightsaber run out of cards, Ancient Lightsaber run out of cards. But when you get decked, it's like your opponent just gets to defeat one of your characters.
Yeah, sure.
Wholesale, whatever.
Let's do it. Okay, moving on. Let's get into, first of all, real quick on Arkham Horror, doing a great thing that Guardians of the Abyss scenario pack has been announced. That contains a couple of the scenarios that were played at Gen Con, and that's going to be played at Arkham Nights. Super cool.
Super
the pack's
smart.
Great. everything about Arkham Horror is A+. This is how living
Keep doing it.
It's how living card games should be. It's cooperative. It's great. The theme is so strong. It's story driven. It's incredible. And in this one, you're in the Egyptian era, like
which
spot.
Looks cool.
I guess you'd call it Egypt, the Egyptian spot itself.
It is a known location, yes.
The original, and you're essentially looking at a medical problem that's going on, and of course, hijinks ensue. But one of the cooler things is that you have these power counters that you're putting on the scenario card, and it's going to basically determine the power of things happening from the encounter deck. So you're trying to manage this weird, basically the weirdness in Egypt. You're trying to either decrease it or increase it so that future cards that you encounter are weaker or stronger. And then if you get knocked out, it's not that you're, from what I can gather, out of the thing. It's that you've succumbed to the sickness, and your allies can do things to rescue you, to bring you back to consciousness, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
That's what I gathered. And then they teased the little Arkham Knight scenario with this little like block of here's the memo that you need to know, and they redacted a bunch of things in black bars. So you get like oh man, this sounds crazy, but you don't know the full story.
That game, which is about obviously like there's like a mystery, there's like something going on. The fact that they're doing articles like that and previewing products in that way,
it's an A+.
Killer.
Out of the park.
Yep.
Hey, let's talk about, speaking of marketing and
things.
Games. Discover, Lands Unknown. Let me tell you one thing real quick. That trailer was phenomenal. Did you watch the trailer?
Yeah, it was like the spinny effects and stuff.
It was getting very simply it wasn't getting locked down in mechanics and nonsense. It wasn't boring.
Marketing shouldn't be
It was
mechanical.
exciting.
I mean, it's the same reason that
discovery.
It was literally about discovery. I like the way you said that.
Interest.
It's the same reason that, like, the classic example of like Apple marketing versus Dell, where it's like Dell's telling you, or Microsoft, how many gigabytes and gigahertz are in the thing, and then Apple's talking about, just people dancing around with an iPod. And so, like, I like that. But what I will say, so if you're unfamiliar, Discover Lands Unknown is the first from Fantasy Flight. It seems like they're really going all in on this unique concept.
As they should. This is an incredibly smart idea.
Unique deck game. Discover is a unique board game. And from what I gather, it's a game about discovery, which is cool. But fundamentally, every copy of the board game is completely unique.
Yes.
Just like KeyForge with the unique decks.
Procedurally generated, because there's essentially maps and terrain, and that's all different. And then the characters and things you encounter are different.
Like there's, I think, 4 to 6 characters in every board game, and there's no, like, those are different in every set, right? Kind of a thing. Right. Which is supremely interesting. Now, I will caveat this by saying the board game Time Stories, which is not a legacy game that you kind of affect as you go, but they have kind of a one-time or one success play, which is once you figure out there's mysteries and you're solving them, and once you know the answer, you can't really play it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm all about that. So
this isn't that, though.
This isn't that, and the reason
you can play it over as many times as you want.
The reason I connect to that, though, is that I don't know if that's true, actually.
It is. Well, I'm almost certain that it is. I read the article.
Oh,
I didn't get the feeling that you play through it once. To me, but maybe I'm wrong.
To me, it felt like you could play through it multiple times, but like essentially you actually discover things, and that knowledge is going to impact almost too much your ability to play it with a clean slate, right? Because you've discovered, right?
That's fair.
I'm not sure, but from what I gather, though, so I mentioned the Time Stories example because I'm very much interested in unique and higher quality experiences over the quantity of them.
It's like an interactive movie, right?
As a person. Yeah. Just like, because this game, I think I saw people basically saying, I like the idea, but at the same time paying $50 or $60 for a one-time affair. But that brings me to my next point, which is cool for both KeyForge and Discover Lands Unknown, which is...
I'm trying to look that up, actually.
He's just right. Like,
I just think it's really important,
to the actual conversation.
Yeah, but I can listen and...
Yeah, so the thing to me about it
tell my wife all the time
is pretty interesting is the idea of trading these games, which is you can play your version of the game, right? And then I can play my version.
Dude, you nailed it.
And
that's so right.
The ability for me to find other people who have copies of Discover, and we just swap copies, right?
Yep.
And so, like, then literally the discovery of games becomes an element of playing this game in the same way with KeyForge, right? Like you discover your deck and then you can swap decks and discover a whole new thing. And there's going to be untold number of thousands of people playing this game. So my hope is that there is a Facebook group or Reddit or some online thing where basically people connect and can actually exchange these games. And I think that alone would increase the value of this purchase, 10, 20-fold.
That's fantastic. I hadn't even thought about that.
That's my hot take.
That's now, really cool.
While you're looking up the replayability,
I'm here. I'm just reading it real quick.
I also generally, I'm very interested in this game, and I am not typically a huge cooperative or board game purchaser or buyer, but I'll definitely be buying one copy of this, and we'll see if there is like an exchange program. I'm very excited to see if that's a real thing, but I also just generally like the look and feel of the game, so it fits into my, I don't know who they designed this for, but I will say that I'm personally fitting into the market for this kind of a game.
This is just looking great.
As he's reading the article.
So, and here's the other thing. I'd like to get on a bit of a soapbox here, because you see this with KeyForge, you see this with the board game community. Anytime you announce this unique thing, new format, and everybody applies old thinking to the new format and says this is why it won't work because it's not the old way. The problem that this game in particular is kind of having to deal with, I think, is a board game segment that says, so it's not that you're giving me a unique experience in the box, it's that you're forcing me to get less content out of what you've already designed. So like, why not just include all possible configurations of this game in a single box and then give me instructions on how to create 20,000 different variations of that experience, right? I can put a bunch of
$200-$300 game.
Well, that's one element of it, but the other thing that I think is just being so missed in this and the KeyForge conversation is how few people actually want to spend the time to do that. Right?
Because you have a game like Gloomhaven, which I know very little about.
I even didn't ran away from it.
But I saw Grant unboxing that in the store, and it's exactly the kind of game I would never play. And there's nothing against it. I would maybe play it, right? Like that, like Twilight Imperium or Seafarers, where it's like this massive thing. I would play it if someone else is doing all the work. Yeah. Like if someone invited me to play and they have it set up and I don't have to do any of that. And then the other element of something like this that is also, kind of super interesting for me, if there is this exchange going on and you are in a group and there's all these copies of the game and you're kind of exploring all these different copies, the idea that you learn how to play this kind of a game once, and then you get to keep experiencing it and diving deeper.
It's perfect.
Into new experiences. And it's not the same as like when you learn how to play Catan. Yeah, you can keep playing it, but like there's eventually a diminishing return, where I've played Catan a lot. My family happened to get really into it back in the early 2000s and just played it to the moon. And now I'm just like not interested because I've experienced basically everything. But every time you get a new copy of Discover, it can actually be a whole new experience.
Yeah, man.
Which is interesting.
And I just breezed through the article. I didn't see anything that seemed to say that you could only play through it once or twice based on what you uncover. And they expressly said it's not like a legacy game that changes based on what you do. It's just all totally unique when you open it up.
That's what
remains to be seen.
I want to see, and I don't know, but I would love to see if playing through it once gives you so much information that you can't really play through it again.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And even if it is the case where you could play maybe 5 to 20 times and then exchange it, I think that there's something there, right? Because the thing about board games, too, is that a lot of times people can buy them and just go home and play them, and they're done. But if a board game actually integrates and facilitates the connecting of the community of people playing this game, I think that's really cool.
Total home run. Yeah. And what Fantasy Flight is doing, and we could not be bigger fans of this ultimately, is they're deciding and kind of probably looking at the data and saying, we think there's a whole lot of people kind of on the edge of this hobby that are wanting to engage with it casually and for random fun. And what that person doesn't want to do is open up a giant box and read through a manual of how to construct the game experience for an hour before they sit down and play. And they're not going to want to sit there and get their entire collection of cards together, figure out what the meta is, how to build a deck, what they need to put in, how many icebreakers, how many... They just want to play. And so they have two variations of the unique format that are providing that experience to people in a unique way for everybody, which has a level of excitement that is not previously attainable, but still gets you to the table right now. And I think it's great. And I think if you're coming at it from a more traditional perspective, it's worth just kind of taking that cloak off and saying, I'm going to approach this from a different perspective, which is the number of people who aren't setting foot in this store right now.
Yeah,
there's a lot of them out there. A vast majority, some would say. So there's Discover. So Zach, since you're here,
I am.
We've got you here on the podcast. You're a common guest. Tell me your thoughts as quickly as you can, although that's not really necessary. We got plenty. We got like a half hour.
Sit back, relax, enjoy my thoughts on the KeyForge.
So we're going to start with Transformers.
I need to really memorize that intro.
Transformers!
I just want to go...
More than meets the eye.
The problem is I want to get caught up in the...
I found the soundboard, I told you, right?
You did. I'm excited that
I listened to all the old... And I remembered Slag, my old Dinobot favorite. It was really awesome.
So you want to know my thoughts on Transformers. So you and Robert were on last week. You talked about Gen Con.
Yes.
And your thoughts on the various games.
We talked about all the games. Yes.
So thoughts on Transformers.
Raw, unfiltered.
It's a new segment of the podcast. Zach Unchained. I think that Transformers is a fun game. It's super simple, and it really feels like I don't want to say that exactly. I would say it's like a popcorn game.
Yeah, it's like the Thor Ragnarok. Now, KeyForge is a Thor Ragnarok themed game, but Transformers is the sit down and have an enjoyable kind of action-packed experience without having to, concern yourself with the thesis of the movie that you just watched.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
And I definitely think, we played with the starters.
It's just it could just be awful starters.
And I remember with the Star Wars TCG back in the day, same company, Wizards, it was that Attack of the Clones starter. Mm-hmm. And it was not the full experience. So I think that the system itself is good, and it's interesting, and there's a lot they can do with it, and it's very simple, and it's not overly complicated. Even the cards in the deck having both an ability and pips on it is something that can be explored. And they can always add new colors, and they could do new things. Who knows what they're going to do there? But I think if you're into Transformers, this game is certainly worth a look. I would, if it were me starting, definitely pick up some starters and probably like a booster box.
Yeah.
Just to kind of feel it out, get the cards, get some new characters, and go from there. But I mean, I would say I'm like medium interested in Transformers as an IP. And I think the game is fun, but like not so fun that like I'm going to find myself diving in heavily. But I think if you're a Transformers fan, this is a huge thing.
Couple of things. Tell me if the following statement is true. The fate of Transformers will depend entirely on how it plays once we get our hands on the first set.
Entirely?
Yeah.
I think a large proportion of the success will be based on that. I think the first set will sell regardless, because people that are into Transformers and into tabletop gaming will gravitate towards it and want to check it out. And then how good that experience is, right? Because this game is super accessible. Like, it's super easy to learn, super fast. You can play a whole lot of games. I see people playing this on their lunch break or with friends after work or after school. So it's very accessible, but the question is, what do you get once you've gained access?
Yeah.
And if that experience is really good, and again, not as a huge Transformers fan, I don't know. When I played Destiny, and I got a handful of games in, and it took 5 or 10 before I was sold on Destiny. Yeah. And it was very simple, but it had the big colorful dice, and I was like, is this for kids? And then you start deck building, and you see all the depth and nuance. I was all about it, and obviously, as I went on my diatribe earlier about Destiny, still going. Every episode, each week that I'm on the podcast, and more Destiny.
The question is, that going to happen with Transformers?
Exactly, and I think if you're into Transformers, and if that depth is there, I think this game could be tremendously successful. And I know there are a ton of Transformers fans. They keep making the movies, even though the last couple, in my opinion, really most of them, besides the first one, were pretty bad. But people keep going to see Transformers, so there's something in the water.
Things are transforming, man. It's the coolest thing ever.
They're all around us.
It is. Transformers as a concept to me is probably way more enticing than it is to you. We had a slightly different childhood in that way. But as a Transformers fan, I'm interested in the game, but it has to play better than the starters play. I see the same thing as you. I think the potential that the mechanics present is there to be used. Whether or not they take that and run with it is going to be the big question of the first set. And so it's definitely worth taking a look at. And I think for me, if we were to split a booster box, maybe do some drafts and do a cube or something and pass around and get our Transformers going and stuff,
I was
think
getting
it'd be
ready to
super
say,
fun.
If we, I don't know how many cards exactly come in the packs and how many you need to build a playable deck, but like the idea of drafting or sealed that game, or I think drafting more interestingly.
Sure, you can get your favorite Transformers.
Yeah, right? And then like you can use the same box or two to draft over and over again, have a cube. I think it's a lot of fun. Like Jonathan and I played a game on stream while we were at Gen Con, and like we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Heaven forbid a game do that.
And that's where like what's interesting about that to me is that they chose the trading card game format, which makes sense for Wizards. They invented it. But at the same time, it's like for a game that seems so casual and fun, the TCG is a very serious format. Now, at the same time, games like Pokemon are hugely successful.
This one, to me, Transformers is aimed squarely at mass market retail. I mean, you're going to have a Transformers thing right next to your Pokemon, and it's like accessible. Kids know it, adults know it.
It could be tremendously successful because of that. They obviously aren't. They know what they're doing, and they have all the mass market connections and all that set up. So, as long as once you deck build and have full spread on like what you're choosing, and I've already seen, you see it, right? It's like cards that like want you to have a bunch of flying Transformers and so on and so forth. So I get it, right? Yeah. It's kind of like in Destiny, the first thing I found was a Sith holocron with a Force ability, and I was like, oh. Yeah, exactly. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. I'm casually interested in drafting it and playing it a little bit. If someone handed me a deck and was like, hey, you want to play Transformers? I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's just play that for an hour.
And
that's fun.
I think the key thing to understand is that not every game has to replace or become the game that you like invest all of yourself into. Yeah. It's not going to replace Destiny for you.
Good luck for any game to do that.
But playing some games of Transformers once a month or once a week, I think is totally on the table.
Sure.
And just, man, I'm excited to take that casual approach to gaming again, which we really haven't done. Where it's just like, you grab you split a box between 4 people, and then you wait 3 months and do it again.
Well, and that's I think it's important to note how many people are in that category, and what it really lets you do when you are approaching it like that. And I'm more and more becoming that, and I just might be that I'm getting old.
I think we're getting old.
But the reality is, like, you can actually play a lot more games.
Yeah.
If you approach it like that. And I think that's what makes something like KeyForge, which we'll talk about in a second, I'm sure, so appealing, is that at the gate, it's doing that. It's like you can't actually do that. You can't get that into it. You can't get into it, but you can't get that deep with like the building and the nuance of it. So take it or leave it. Here's what it is.
Let's move on to Warhammer Champions. In a similar category as Transformers for me, and in some ways it's very different, but another collectible format game that, at least to me, seems most attractive as a casually collected and or drafted and or it'd be a great sealed game actually to me. I don't know exactly why yet, but it just feels that way. That we might just want to, you and your friends might just want to take a box every now and again and split it around and build with it and play it and then wait on the next set.
Well, and I think, one of the kind of interesting paradigms that's laying over here for Warhammer Champions as we're talking about it, to me, is like, I think early on with collectible games, and even now with Magic as the biggest collectible game in the world, the intent of those games is rarely that players are going to own the whole thing.
Right, yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially in our audience because of our history with living card games and such, approach games in that mentality of like, I have to own it all, and I have to be able to build it all, and I have to be able to play it all. And that's what is, thinking about Transformers and Warhammer, where it's like a lot of people play Magic, as an example, strictly drafting or sealed. Yeah. There's never even a constructed. And I do think Warhammer Champions, I don't know how the sealed and draft's going to work, but I'm very interested in it. And I will say Warhammer Champions is easily the game that I saw at Gen Con that I had the lowest expectations, and it returned the highest level of experience for me. I was not expecting really anything. I've never been a huge Warhammer fan. Had never heard of Play Fusion. The game looked old. And now I'm learning that like that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
But it looked
it's also
old.
Free art.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I felt about Transformers too, right? Where it's like a lot of this art feels like it's from the 80s, and I think it is.
Yeah, it is.
But it delivered in a big way. I think that game is really fresh. I'll say that
diamond
much.
in the rough, isn't it? And Play Fusion doing some incredible things with the digital integration. This is one that we could look back on. We were talking about earlier in a couple of years and say, wow, this was a moment that we didn't truly realize was significant.
Was really
or as significant
something
as
was happening there. And I think one thing that's curious to me is that I feel like there's a general increase in the number of collectible games that are coming out.
There is. That's why Gen Con was what it was for us this year. It's like, finally, like, it's just a lot of expandable games happening all at once. That's rare. That wasn't happening previous
I
years.
wonder how much of that is predicated on Destiny and its success. Because I feel like before Destiny, I don't know if we weren't looking, but like in the years before that, in the 90s and early 2000s, there was a new collectible game every week.
Yeah.
It felt like it was just all the time. And then at some point it was like, well, this is harder and more expensive and less profitable than we thought. So like people stopped doing it.
Yeah. And there was like 1,000 players that were trying to collect 6,000 games. It's like,
yeah, it was just it wasn't sustainable. The industry grew quite a bit, right? Destiny came out and it was more accessible. It was Star Wars. It was easier for people to get into, not as easy to buy up front. But now you kind of have this, like, there's a lot more coming out. So I have a feeling, especially if these games are all successful, like if Warhammer and Transformers find success and Destiny continues being successful, that we may be entering the second period of collectible land grabbing. And we'll see. We'll see if that's right. And I think the main thing about Warhammer Champions, whereas Transformers to me very much feels like the task was design a collectible game using Transformers.
Yeah.
That was the thing. But Warhammer Champions feels like not only is it designing a trading card game or a collectible game in the Warhammer Age of Sigmar universe, but it is actually also trying to push the envelope on here's what it means to be a card game, or here's what a card game can look like. And I think that's why I was so impressed with it. Versus Transformers, where it is fun, and it's a respectable like trading card game, but at the same time, nothing that's happening there makes me feel like, ooh, that's an interesting combination of what's going on here. It just is what it is.
Yeah, it's a nice Transformers game. And Warhammer Champions playing the digital card too, and I think that the digital integration side of things allows collectible games to be more accessible to a larger number of players, right? And this is the first game that allows you to directly scan in every single card that you own. And that is revolutionary in a way that nobody is talking about, including us. But I think it's extremely relevant that my entire collection is both digital and physical. What that does for both platforms in terms of engagement is high.
I think yet to be fully utilized or seen. Yeah. And from everything I gather from PlayFusion, they're intending on using it.
It's a good one to keep our eye on.
I'm interested.
Finally, ride the old horse down KeyForge here, if that one hasn't been talked about to death, even though I think a lot of folks are still wanting to hear more about it and kind of interested in it. I shared a lot of my thoughts. We've been live streaming, sharing some thoughts there. Tell me about KeyForge. What's your quick thesis at this point?
Hot 20. So
hot 20
hot
minutes.
20. Here we go. So when people ask me about this, and there's been no shortage of people asking me about it, I think it's really important to divide the format and the game into two different categories, because the Unique Deck game is something to be talked about.
Sure.
And then the game of KeyForge is worth talking about as well. But the Unique Deck game, I think, is super intriguing. I think that it is going to appeal to a lot of people who have never found a home in the tabletop card gaming space. So you get a lot of the benefits of playing a card game. It's way more like a sealed format. There's obviously unique stuff going on, but I think people who are serious card gamers will be surprised at the number of people KeyForge actually appeals to.
Yes.
So
I 100% agree with that.
We have our local store.
Work together.
Yeah, that's what makes sense, right? We have a local store here in Tulsa, and the number of people who come into our store and are a part of our community that have found their way into various games, and our whole goal as an entity is making it easier for people to get into these games.
Yeah.
But who found their way into these communities, but have had to force their way in. It's like someone's playing Destiny and they're kind of barely keeping up.
It's like they found their way enough that they understand how awesome and appealing it ultimately is, but then have no choice but to eventually drop off because it's just too much.
It's just going to burn out, right?
Yeah.
You can tell that it's not their speed. But anyways, the number of people that come in that this game is perfect for is high. So I think that's why we are just initially very excited about the format, because we see it day to day in our store, the number of people this kind of an experience would be very applicable to.
We're streaming it last night, 5 people that are not currently really super engaged in any kind of card game community were very interested. And people who had played card games, Joe, our friend Joe Tressiter, he picked up Thrones for a hot minute, got some chapter packs, understood it, loved the deck building, loved the competition, loved all of that. Life caught up to him, dropped out, fell way behind. Can't play Thrones anymore.
He's just
so how does
out of the race,
does he get back into Thrones by paying $200-300 and getting all the cards?
Well,
no.
he doesn't have the time to catch up.
But he also knows what a card game is, and so it's like I can pitch him KeyForge and say it's $10 and you're done. The end.
You're ready.
And he's ready. James from the Coffee Shop Next Door, Destiny player, right?
Yep.
Falls behind. It's like I really want to play. I just don't have time. I don't have the resources. Like $10.
Yeah.
You can play with us any night you want.
Yeah. So I think the format is very strong. And I think people will be surprised at its success, especially people that are currently being critical or questioning it. The second thing is the game itself. We've been playing the game. We've been doing live streams on both our YouTube and Facebook. So if you're interested in seeing the game, we'll be doing more of that, probably with all of these games. But the more I play it, it reminds me a lot of Destiny, not in the way it plays, but in terms of how I'm feeling about it. Where the first 3 to 5 games, I was like, yeah, this is fun enough. Like, I'm having fun, and it's Star Wars, so this is cool. But then by like game somewhere in 5 to 10, we played a game the other day.
It's fantastic.
And it was just like, this is incredible.
I've been telling people it is a system that incorporates all of the most fun elements from the previous card games I played all in one package.
And removes deck building and metagames and collecting, and instead replaces it with basically sealed.
And which for some people, that's going to be a turnoff. But for a large number of people that are not typically vocal, it's a huge, I don't want to say turn on because that has some connotations to it, but it's a huge draw for the game.
Well, and I think that's for me, it's like I mentioned earlier, for a game to come along and replace Destiny on my list is almost impossible. Yeah. So like, I'm not looking for another deck building game. That's why like Warhammer Champions and Transformers are lower on my list, where it's like if I draft it when a set comes out, okay, I would do that. Maybe occasionally play Constructed once a year, twice a year. After I've drafted enough cards to actually build a deck.
Sure.
But something like KeyForge, it's like even your most hardcore card gamers who I'm playing Destiny every week, I'm collecting everything that comes out. It's like, I've got space for KeyForge.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
And the community, again, the community it's going to appeal to is it literally can hit everyone from the most serious card gamer to someone who's not even playing games right now. And that's the last point I'll make on KeyForge, which is, let alone the 9 out of 10 people that come into our store already who this game is great for. What about the other 99% of the population who think a tabletop game is Monopoly? It's like, good luck getting them in on Destiny. As much as I love it and as easy as it is, and the fact that it's Star Wars and how great it is, that is still an impossible challenge. Yeah. So like, I'm really excited about it for those reasons.
And KeyForge could be the kind of game that makes all of those games more successful.
I 100% believe that's the case.
For somebody who decides they want to go
You're talking about Joe. It's like, does it get him coming back every week?
Yeah.
Does it let him keep his foot in the door? And then if he's around enough, does he eventually get bit by that Thrones bug again?
Yeah. Good questions.
We'll see. Last thing I want to mention before we get to the questions, man, that was an intense.
Yeah, man, we've got, we're going to run a little bit long.
But I want to mention Mutton Chop. We have a custom token holder here. We met you at Gen Con. I just want to say thanks. We really appreciate it.
Awesome.
The support
Made some token boxes
we get
for us.
both in terms of so cool. Literally meeting people at places like Gen Con who are listening to our show and enjoying it and giving us gifts like this, all the way to every time any of you ask us a question, leave a comment on a video, share our content, is just unbelievable and humbling. So thank you very much, and a shout out to you, Mutton Chop, and everyone else that's listening for doing that, because if you didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to do what we do, and it's much appreciated.
That is true. Ask Covenant hashtag is the thing
That's
you can use.
That's how my mom hashtags things.
Ask Covenant hashtag.
She did, and sorry, Mom, if you're ever watching this, I have 3 brothers. We all joke about this still. She did a Throwback Thursday with TBT hashtag. So now we will randomly in text messages even be like, TBT hashtag. It's really funny. But anyways, if you're unfamiliar, you can use the hashtag AskCovenant on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We collect those questions and we try to answer as many of those as possible. So leave the questions there or in the comments of one of our YouTube videos, but be sure to use the hashtag AskCovenant. That lets us know that you officially want that question to be on the show, and we'll answer them right here on the show.
Let's kick it off. Let's do this lightning round style, Zach. Our old friend Jeff Gum from the Monster Apocalypse days to Cactus. What made you guys decide to support the Transformers TCG when you've made a point of avoiding Magic? Just curious. A lot of other comments on that from Will and others about what is this pivot to seemingly more collectible style games? What's that all about? Hot take. That's a hard one to immediately get into.
That's a big. So there's a few things that are happening. As we mentioned earlier in the show, I think that we are seeing more collectible games come out than have in recent past. There's also been a lot of advancements in our just general strategy and thinking at Covenant and our role in the tabletop gaming community. And so for a long time, we were very we just believed, and what we did is we curated games and we only sold what we thought were games that we were into, and also games that we thought were the best.
We wanted to drive the industry, essentially, in a lot of ways.
And so it makes sense, right? We wanted to support the games that we thought deserved supporting. And we grew up playing games typically that weren't Magic, and Magic was at the center of everything, so we would always get cast to the side or kicked off of tables or not get support for our games. And a lot of those games that aren't Magic, a lot of times communities have to build the community around and schedule the events and all that. But not to go into all that, the other thing is that more and more we're starting to focus on genuinely making it easier for everyone in our audience and everyone in the world to understand what a game is, how to play it, and make it as easy as possible for those people to buy it. Because at the end of the day, if you're into Transformers, and maybe I'm not super into Transformers, we still want to help you get involved in that community to build the tabletop community as much as we can. And so it's not really a pivot to TCGs as much as that's just the opportunities that are happening. Those are the games that are coming out. Those are the games people are having questions about. And at this point with Magic, no one's asking questions. Like, that's the precedent. That's what all the support's around. So us doing stuff for Magic is not going to help anybody get involved in tabletop gaming. Or really, it's not going to help as many people. And again, we're having to judge where can our effort have the most impact. And we think the best way for us to help grow the tabletop community is focusing on not Magic.
That's right. And also, of the expandable games that have released, they're all collectible, just happen to be, right? And that's just the reality of it, because there's no LCGs and whatnots coming out anymore. I guess L5R was the last one?
Yeah, well, we covered that pretty well, I think.
Yeah, who knows?
Actually, that was the game that launched the Learning Series.
That's right.
And the first launched a whole new perspective at the Covenant.
At the Covenant.
The Covenant House.
Question 2, regarding God Tier from Metodi Nikolaev. Would love to hear Zach and Steve's extended thoughts on the experience/gameplay of God Tier in the Covenant cast or during the YouTube upload. What stood out for me was the way that Steven made that first positioning. It almost felt like chess. I really hope positioning and long-term strategies as essential to the win as punching face. Zach, what do you think as someone who played really God Tier for the first to second serious time in that video?
On camera, I think a couple of things. To go to his note, I think position is a huge element of that game. I think it will always be the way the objectives work and the models work and the way you can block movement with your, what are those called?
Followers.
I want to say minions every time.
Yeah,
followers. But second thing is, I had a lot of fun.
I think the game was incredibly fun.
And I actually very much am into the idea of a format where, like, it's teams. Star Wars LCG back in the day, my favorite format was 2v2.
Yeah.
And it was because there was just so much more interaction and social interaction, and the vibe around the game was different. And so a lot of times when you're getting serious and it's one-on-one, like you can stop talking and stop recognizing there's a human across from you. But I had a lot of fun playing with someone. So I would actually be interested in either we each bring our own champion or we each bring 2 champions.
Yeah.
And playing like that. I'm also interested to play the standard game or whatever. But more and more it's like, what's the most fun way to play this and then do that is kind of the question I'm asking. And I think God Tier was heck of fun.
I think that's the thing, Metodi, that we came, we stopped that filming and we said that was like the most fun miniatures game experience that I've had maybe ever, and certainly in recent memory. And maybe not being able to tell you why exactly that was, but at least at first glance, it's like, that was awesome.
Super fun.
So really looking forward to more. Kyle Hugh, Team Covenant. I was browsing your site and saw in the shop mention of an 8/18/18, which is this weekend, and 2/2/19 Destiny Draft Qualifier, and there have been 3 since then. How locked in are these dates? I'm in Seattle and would love to fly in. Want to be confident. They're totally locked in, 100% locked in. They will not change.
So he asked this a minute ago, which I realized when we were reviewing these questions. But important to note, if you're wanting to come to a Masters, that's a big reason we shifted the events the way we did. The formats, they're all announced. There's now one in October, November, and December. And the February one is actually the championship. You have to qualify for that. So you can find out more about the Covenant Masters on our site. But those dates are now in the formats completely locked in. So if you want to come, do so.
We won't change them. It will not happen. Moving on, question 4, Chris F. Hilarious, at Chris KeyForge. Thanks to the subscription price, I ordered 3 times as much KeyForge than I was planning to, which we're happy to help you, Chris. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Ask Kevin, which KeyForge house are each of you most excited to play and why? I'm excited to still Amber with Shadows, and Dees has an unconditional board wipe at Common.
So one thing I want to mention before we actually answer the question, he mentions this subscription, which if you're unfamiliar, we launched a KeyForge subscription. A display of KeyForge decks is 12 decks. Map price, which is the lowest you can legally advertise and charge. Free shipping, so if you want to guarantee you get that stuff without prepaying for it months in advance and you know you're going to have it on or super close to release, you can check out the subscription.
And on that note, I would do 12 decks to start. I think that's about the perfect number. And here's what you could do. I mathed this out. You know, it'd be really fun. You could get a box and you could open a new deck every week.
You could. That'd be a 3-month experience.
And that's about the time the next session.
So what I'm thinking about doing, actually, I already signed up for one. I'm thinking about signing up for a second one.
The more we play.
I got bit. It's a problem. No, but what I'm planning on doing is I have favorite houses, which is very topical here. I have favorite houses, and so you can open a deck without seeing what's inside the deck. So you can open it, it's still like sealed, right? Yeah. So in the way the ID faces, you can't actually see what's in the deck list unless you open it. And I'm planning on basically starting by opening, my favorite houses, which will probably be 6 to 12 decks, and there's 3 or 4 that I really like. So the ones that have those in them, I'm particularly going to do, and then I'm going to leave the other ones sealed. And technically, there could be the super rare stuff in them. I don't know.
You don't know the content.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know if I give away one of these.
Yeah.
But then what I'm planning on doing is either locally here or online, essentially swapping, which is trading with someone who wants those particular houses. And then the rest, I'm going to plan on using a certain amount of them. I have a lot of friends I've been wanting to get into tabletop gaming for a while, and I'm just going to give them a deck or 2. And depending on if they have someone who I think they're going to get to play against, just to give them a taster.
Yeah, that's nice.
So we'll see.
Just sprinkle it in there. That's a totally new way to buy and collect KeyForge that I hadn't considered previous to you telling me this.
The swapsy doodles is the way to do it.
So you can open it up, leave the shrink wrap on, you pull this deck out that's all shrink wrapped. You don't know the contents, but it does tell you the 3 houses that are present. If you don't like those houses, you can leave it in the shrink wrap, trade that shrink wrap deck with another shrink wrap deck.
And it's all
that is guaranteed to have houses you like.
Right? It's equal.
Interesting.
So
Love it.
We'll see. But favorite house, actually answering the question.
Brobnar. I love their play effects. I love the fact that they're so aggro and offensive, and I love that they have a lot of synergy with things that bounce them back to hand. I think that mechanic is extremely fun in KeyForge because it's a I take my turn, you take your turn game. It's way less fun whenever I'm doing a challenge in Thrones and I don't know if you have stuff that's going to jump into it. That sucks.
The non-interactivity on your opponent's turn is really good in that game, in my opinion. So I think if I had to pin down one, there's a handful I really like, but Untamed is currently the winner. And that is because it's somewhere between the aggro of Brobnar and the control of Dees. So I think my ideal deck would be Brobnar, Untamed, Dees.
Nice.
I don't know if that's the case. I feel like there's one I'm forgetting that I really like. Oh, Sanctum sometimes. I really like those Bulwarks or whatever they are.
Those Bulwarks or whatever. Nonsense.
Anyways, so I think that Dees, Brobnar, Untamed is going to be my sweet spot. And I'm hoping to get at least 3 or 4 decks. And that's the thing, right? If I get 2 displays, hopefully at least 2 or 3 of that. And then if I can trade it for 2 or 3 more, now I've got 6 options of very different decks that are exclusively the houses that I'm into.
Nice.
So I'm excited about that.
All right, finally, Josh Zink, final question here, and this is only for me, Zach. Sorry, I appreciated the escape velocity mentioned a while back on the Covenant cast. What's everybody's favorite ship from the series? I'm sad that you didn't get to play this game. It was truly the best game
I bet I would have loved it
on computer.
Given my X-Wing Star Wars space fighty obsession.
Just the best game. I played Escape Velocity and then Escape Velocity Nova, which was also phenomenal. There is no better game to make you feel like you're truly in space. It's just unbelievable. To answer your question, Josh, my favorite ship was probably early on, and probably if I could choose one, it was the Lightning. I liked the proton cannons over the turrets, and didn't like missiles, rockets, any of that. I liked all lasers all the time.
So I saw this question before the show, so I looked up some of the ships.
Oh, nice. Good for you.
It's impossible.
I have Jonathan's too.
It's impossible for me to have a favorite because I haven't played. But I'm curious, are you familiar with the Rebel Dragon?
Oh, yeah. Dude, you gotta... Yeah, I'll tell you all about that. Actually, hold on.
So I just saw it, and I was like, all right. So the idea of... It looked cool, and then I saw the name, and I was like, if I had to pick a favorite, I feel like that's it, but it could also just be an awful ship.
So get this. So the Lightning, essentially, these are all civilian ships. These are all ships you could buy just by getting enough money through trading and merchant stuff. So I was a big Lightning fan. I kind of enjoyed the Rapier towards the end. It was a little slower, though, so I kind of went back and forth. And I once decked out an Argosy by gutting all of its cargo space, putting weapons in it, and took out a lot of pirates, and it was a huge amount of fun. Jonathan was a big fan of the Clipper. He was also another person here that played the game, and he would load it up with missiles and rockets and all that kind of stuff, and then just unload on people, whereas I liked the sustainability of the laser weapon.
That is totally Jonathan.
Makes sense, right?
I can't even explain how Jonathan that is.
And then let me explain this to you, considering there was a war going on between the Rebels and the Confederates. Okay. That was essentially what was happening in the game. And all those ships would be floating around, and if they ever were in the same space, they'd be fighting each other. Well, you would just land on planets and randomly missions would pop up. You approach somebody in the bar, or something happens. Occasionally, you would get a prompt to do this kind of a mission, and you had no idea what it was leading to. And it would lead you on like a 17 to 18 mission series, where at the end of it, you became a member of either the Confederacy or the Rebellion based on the strings that you went down.
That's crazy.
And that was amid like hundreds of random things that you were doing.
When did this come out?
It was like, incredible. 90s, I think.
Was this like a pretty innovative...
It was on Mac only, so like... Classic. 6 people played it at the time.
Hey,
right.
Hey, there was more than that.
Not like Mac gamers, like of iMacs, it's like whatever.
That's so funny.
So it was an incredible game. I'd encourage anybody to check it out. Thank you,
Can
Josh,
you play
for
it
bringing
on
it back
Mac
to me.
now?
I don't think so. No, they packed it up. In fact, I wrote them when I was younger, and I said this would be the perfect MMO. Every ship that you see is another person. It'd be unbelievably good. And they said, we have no plans to do that. In fact, we have really no plans for escape velocity.
We're just done. We're escaping.
Very sad.
This velocity.
Zach, you got a question for the audience?
I do have a question. So I think the kind of new, crazy hot topic is this concept of unique games. So we have a unique board game. We have a unique card game. I would love to hear, if you're listening / watching, in the comments below, what's your take and what are your thoughts on unique games? And if you have any crazy ideas on where a new type of unique game that could come out, or where this whole thing could go, I'd love to hear about that too. So thanks for answering. Until next time, keep playing.